Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Caregiving Gen X Style. I'm Steve Mullen.
And I'm Jennifer Mullen.
Finding out that your loved one has been diagnosed with dementia can bring up a lot of emotions. For some, it's no surprise at all. Others are sent into a tailspin, wondering what's in store in the coming years. In this episode, we're going to talk about some advice from a seasoned healthcare worker about the things you need to do immediately after you get that diagnosis. But first, Jennifer, how's your mom?
Goggy's doing well. Of course, if you've listened to the most recent episode, we had a hospital stay and, that gave us a little setback for a little bit, but we seem to be back on track and we have sort of the usual cycle of in-home healthcare, which is happening now. So it's, a lot of organization between my brother and I with some follow-up doctor's appointments and in-home physical therapy. Interestingly, it was determined she really didn't need occupational therapy, which I totally agree with. I mean, she actually kind of bounced back and was getting around her apartment pretty well. So occupational therapy not needed. We're still waiting. We know she's been approved for speech therapy, and I know we're looking forward to that because, Steve, I know your mom's a big fan of the speech therapy.
She's been doing speech therapy for a long time, once every couple of weeks, and it's not for speech.
Right. It's
for
really
memory.
For memory. Yeah, which I think is going to be...
Memory technique. It's helped her a lot.
Yeah, I think I do think that is going to be really good for mom. But speaking of the occupational therapy and getting around her apartment, she is getting around her apartment very well, but my brother and I made the decision to upgrade her rollator. The one that she had, I think it actually was a hand-me-down, Steve.
It was my mother's.
Yeah. So, and it's been perfectly fine, perfectly lovely. The brakes on it haven't worked fantastically, and mom has wood floors in her apartment,
which makes it hard.
Which does make it really hard because even when the brakes are on, that thing can kind of slide across the floor anyway, and the wheels are a little bit thinner on it. So my brother and I decided to upgrade. I actually went onto Consumer Reports and looked for the top rated rollator. Found one not too terribly expensive. You would think that we have made the most drastic change on the face of the planet by switching to the new rollator. Mm-hmm. And very classic for my mom. I think you know this, Steve, after, 30 some years. Within 30 minutes of it being in her apartment. So
it took that long?
You put it together here. Yes. We had it delivered here. You put it together. And then my brother came and picked it up one day. It was like his day with mom. He came and picked it up, took it back. And I, started getting the texts about mom doesn't like it. She says it's too big. It, this, that, and the other. Of course, we'd measured it. We knew it was going to get through the doorways. Mm-hmm. It is a little bigger. It's a little,
I consider it sturdier.
It's a lot sturdier. The brakes are way better. The wheels are a little bit thicker. Yep. Just in general, it's kind of like the Mac Daddy rollator. It's a little Cadillac rollator. It's pretty nice. But oh my goodness, like she immediately... I don't like it. It's too big. It's too big. So, the next day was my day to go over there. And, I was rather, I don't want to say stern, but I was just very matter of fact. I said, Mom, this is what you do. Something changes and you don't even give it a chance. Within, 2 minutes, you're like, yeah, I don't like it. It's not going to work. I can't figure it out. Whatever it is. And I said, we're just going to practice with it. A little bit each day until you get used to it. And of course, within a few days, I think it's been going okay. Her physical therapist, who's a no-nonsense guy, he's really great. But he gave it the big old thumbs up and, thought it looked much better, was much safer for her. So I'm pleased to report, what are we, a week into the new rollator?
I'm right about that, yeah.
A week, maybe a little more than a week. Seems like things are settling in and she's getting used to it.
Because I had not gotten an update on that. All I heard was that she was ready to give up on it immediately.
She was. But, just a reminder, actually, all sort of, exasperation aside about that, it's a reminder, even the smallest of changes can sort of be a big disruption for our elderly loved ones. So... Anyway, so that's how Goggy is. Steve, how's your mom?
She's fine. I went in there, I don't know, the other day, sometime in the past week or so, and we finished all of her to-do list, which is a standard thing when I get over there. We need to do this. We need to do this. We need to order this. I mean, she's got a literal written down to-do list, and we finished all that. And that's when we usually just chit chat for a little while until it's time for her to go up and have dinner at 4:30. But she said, I wanted to talk to you about something. I said, okay. She said, do I have a sign that says I'm here to help? I said, what do you mean? She said, just lately, everyone has been coming to me for help. I said, what are you talking about? She said, just whenever there's a new person here, they find me and start asking me questions on how to do this, how to do this, how to do this. I said, well, Mom, that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I said, really, I think what it is word gets around pretty quickly who knows how to do things.
Yeah.
And I've said it before, in an assisted living, there are going to be a very limited number of people who don't have memory problems, whose brain is still working pretty well. And she's one of them. She's got a couple of other friends. There's a group of about 5 of them.
I was going to say there's the group of them, but then that's probably it.
Round about it. Yeah, I really think so. And I mean, we sat there and kind of listed off. Yeah. And I mean, it's
just by observation when I've been there, and of course I'm not there near as much as you are, but I know who her sort of core group of friends are. And when I look around, when we see people sitting in the dining room or other areas of the community, they don't all seem quite as with it as your mom. And
like
her
I
friends.
said, I mean, it's a small community. It's not that big, and I think word gets around pretty quickly where this person asked so-and-so, and they said, well, ask Nana. She'll know.
She'll say Nana, though.
They don't say Nana. They say her name, but I'm not saying her name. But you know what I mean? It was just kind of funny. And, it's...
Maybe you should actually get her a sign to hang on the back of her wheelchair.
I'm here to help.
It'd actually be kind of funny.
Yeah, I don't know if she'd appreciate that. Or you could
just quietly put it on the back of her wheelchair and not tell her.
Kind of like a kick me sign.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm
sorry. It really is. I mean, it's funny, though, because I became friends with this woman whose mother actually lived in the old assisted living that my mother was in, and then she moved over to the new one. She unfortunately passed away, but she got to know my mother. She got to know me. She referred to my mother as the mayor. I mentioned it to my mother. She said, no. I know who the mayor is. And she said the person's name. And she said, I'm the vice mayor. I'm not the mayor. I don't want that kind of power.
Yeah, but she does.
She does.
She likes having the title.
Oh, she absolutely. She wants the power. She wants to be the power behind the power, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, but I'm glad she's doing well.
Things are fine.
Yeah.
Things are really fine.
That's good. We have a couple things we want to touch on before we head into this episode. One shout out I would like to give very quickly. I had a lovely visit recently. So I have a good friend who I worked with 23, almost 25 years ago.
Many years ago.
And she lives overseas now. And
I believe you've mentioned her on the podcast before.
I probably have. Well, actually, her mom has given us...
She wrote in, or she did a voicemail, didn't she? She wrote in or did a voicemail. She had a question.
She sent us an email. But my friend was in town. Of course, it's always a treat when I get to see her because I might only get to see her once a year at best. And sometimes there's a handful of years in between. But this time when she was in town, she asked if I would come have dinner with her and her mom and her sister because her mom and her sister are both big fans of the podcast. So we had the best time a couple of weeks ago when I got to visit with them. They are big fans of the show. It was really kind of funny because they commented about how odd it was to meet her sister I'd met many years ago, 25 years ago, but it's been a really long time. But they just talked about how odd it was that I was standing there right in front of them and they know my voice. Mm-hmm. But there I am like live and in person. And they asked a couple of like detailed questions, things that we don't really talk about, a couple little things that we haven't like been very specific about on the show. So, we had fun kind of talking about a few of the little inside things and, small world, like they have someone in their, orbit who lived at the same community where your mom now lives. Mm-hmm. So I learned that. And we actually had a lot of good conversation. My friend's sister has had some caregiving and in her world actually had her, I hope I get this right, I think it was her mother-in-law for 6 weeks, bed set up in their, living room, post I think it was post-surgery, and just some of the caregiving stories there. So anyway, had a lot of fun. Fontaine, I think we've talked about, that's my friend's mom who had sent in the listener email a while ago, and then her sister Cass, and of course my friend Jessica. Thank you so much for having me over. I had a great time. It was really fun to sort of hear your feedback about the show. And after the dinner had wrapped up, I had forgotten to take, we have business cards, and I had forgotten to take those with me. And they were joking about getting my autograph and getting your autograph. So you and I autographed some business cards, and I dropped them in the mail over to them.
There you go.
It was a great evening.
So there's one other thing we wanted to talk about before we get into this episode. It's kind of funny. So we started doing a rewatch of The Sopranos, the HBO show.
Excellent
from,
show.
Years ago.
Quality TV.
It is high quality TV. And we watched it before, but this was forever ago. I mean,
whenever it was shortly after it was like first out.
Right. No, we may have been watching it when it was out. I'm not really sure, but so we're rewatching this because it's a high quality show. But what we didn't get back then is that this show, aside from being a show about the New Jersey mob and murderers and all kinds of scams and stuff like that, it's also a show about caregiving.
It really is.
If you go back and watch it right now as a caregiver, you will understand what I'm talking about, because Tony is taking care of her mother, who, by the way, his mother. And his mother tries to manipulate him every chance she gets.
Oh, yeah.
He has to move her. I'm sorry about the spoilers, but this show has been out for a long time, so I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. He has to move her into a hoity-toity assisted living. And then, she ends up in the hospital, which we're not really sure. Don't ruin it for us. We're not really sure if she actually needs to be there or if she's trying to manipulate him.
Yeah, it is. It's
because she put out a hit on him.
I was going to say, it's very clever how they do it, because you literally don't know, is she going into the first stages of dementia?
Well, I think it was that she supposedly had a stroke.
Yeah, but even before that, there were a few things where you're like, does she really not know who her granddaughter is?
Yeah.
There was that
Who's that
scene.
over there?
Yeah, or is it her way of doing getting herself out of any potential future trouble because she put the hit out on him?
Right. Yeah. So we recommend you go back and watch it now as a caregiver. It's actually kind of interesting. There's some funny stuff in there, and I'd highly recommend it.
Well, it was funny because you mentioned it probably the first time there was something related specifically to him and having to care for his mom, and you said, "Oh my God, this is like a caregiving show." And I was like, "Oh yeah."
You chuckled, ha ha ha.
Well, it was like a caregiving episode, maybe a piece of it. But we've now watched several more episodes since then, and they all have involved some level of him,
some B or C plot in the episode.
And I think it might have been the most recent episode that we watched. He's got two sisters, and one lives on the West Coast, and has been basically non-existent in helping with the mom, and now she's back and claiming she wants to help with the mom, although there's a whole other underlying thing related. Does she really want to help the mom, or does she want money? What is it? And then there's another sister, which it sounds like
and she doesn't seem to want to be involved at all. Tony, let Tony take care of it.
Let him handle it. Yeah. So it actually, there is a little bit of a subplot of caregiving.
We're into the beginning of season 2 now, and it hasn't stopped. So it's still going.
We're ready to watch mob hits, and we're we can't get away from it, Steve.
Oh my goodness.
All right. Well, speaking of dementia,
and let's get into our episode finally.
Let's get into it. So, dementia is a condition that can last for many years. And during that time, you're likely to see a downward progression in your loved one's abilities and cognition. And that's why if you've just learned about the diagnosis, there are certain things that you need to do, really, if you can, in the first 90 days to ensure that your caregiving journey is as smooth as physically possible.
Now, in this episode, we're going to review some tips from a gentleman named Vance Frost.
Which, by the way, what a great name. This is an awesome name.
Yeah.
I love it.
He's a nurse practitioner who's worked in New York City intensive care units for decades. He's also a Substack author. and wrote an article on this topic. I contacted him. He graciously offered to let us use the information from the article for this episode. We will put a link to his Substack in the show notes for this episode. And I think I forgot to mention Jennifer. I had mentioned to him, I'm not sure when we're going to get this out. Jennifer's mother is in the hospital right now, but I'll let you know. And like a week later, he sent me an email. How's Jennifer's mom?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
So wait, sorry, did you say this? Is he a listener of our show?
No.
Or you okay.
No, he might be now. I'm not really sure.
Okay, but you happened upon him.
I mentioned.
Okay, but then that's funny that he wrote back and asked how my mom was.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love it. Okay. All right. Well, let's get to his first piece of advice.
Yes.
Vance's first piece of advice for the first 90 days after a diagnosis is really to get your legal house in order. This is, of course, critical because right now your loved one may just be a tiny bit forgetful, but down the road they might not recognize you. And, thus they wouldn't be considered legally fit to sign a power of attorney. You will need that POA for more things than you can possibly imagine. If you wait too long to get it, you'll end up having to get a conservatorship through the courts, which I can't even imagine how complicated that would be.
The legal fees can go into the thousands for that kind of thing, and it takes forever.
Time-consuming. And POAs, we've definitely touched on that topic here and there throughout.
I use the one for my mother all the time.
I was just going to say, forget dementia diagnoses. Yes. I mean, my brother and I both have, like if we're trying to call to handle something on behalf of mom, they have our names on file and they do ask that, they ask the question, who are you? What is your name? What is your relation, to this person? So that's a good piece of advice no matter what, but 100% if you get a diagnosis like this and have the, realization that you might not be recognized by your loved one anymore, you've got to get it squared away.
With my mother and to an extent your mother, really to your mother as well, for us, it's kind of a matter of convenience to be able to, we can be the ones to call the bank. I sold my mother's car, I sold her house. But when you're dealing with dementia, at some point or another, they will be physically and mentally incapable of doing these things.
Yeah.
And it's just not, frankly, safe for them to do it because they will mess something up badly.
Yep.
Or they'll forget how to do these things. So that's why it's really, really, really important with dementia patients.
Absolutely.
Vance's next piece of advice is to lock down their finances. You can do this before you get the POA if your name is on your loved one's bank account or credit card. He says, as your loved one progresses through dementia, they may become more and more susceptible to being defrauded. Also, they might just start spending money stupidly.
Yeah.
Vance suggests starting a new account. This is actually, I think, a really good idea. Start a new account, put a little spending money in there for your loved one, and remove their access to the larger account where the bulk of their money is held.
Yeah.
That way, your loved one can still spend money. They can buy stuff if they want to, but only to a point.
All right. So they still have some autonomy, it's kind of an allowance. Some independence. Yeah. I mean, listen, these are sort of depressing things to think about. These are the turning points in life where suddenly the parent basically becomes the child. And as we're talking through this, it can sound a little harsh to think about having to handle something this way. It almost it can feel a little bit icky. I can't come up with the quite the right word for it.
Oh, I understand what you're saying. It feels weird to be that controlling, but you really, in this particular instance, you have to. It's funny you mentioned, I think I was going to mention this later, but Vance, in his Substack, he says he provides advice with no anesthesia. And his point basically with that is that he's not going to sugarcoat things.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's very, very blunt about what you need to do with this particular stuff. And
he's seen it all.
He has seen it all.
Listen, I think part of why maybe it feels a little sort of just icky in general is, certainly there are probably family dynamics out there, especially if you're talking about an elderly person who maybe has some significant, amount of money, significant assets. Does it feel a little bit like someone in the family is trying to get control of something so that they've got other designs on those funds at some point? those are things I think individual families, you kind of got to talk through those things and figure out the best way to handle them. But just, generally speaking, to avoid complete disaster or the draining of a bank account because someone just simply doesn't know what they're doing anymore, this is critical. And again, can't stress it enough. I mean, my name is on my mom's bank account. Not that there's a lot of money there, but you know, and I have a debit card that's connected to her account, which, by the way, convenient. If I need to swing by the store to pick up something, but I haven't had time to go to her apartment first and then I'm going to go back out, I mean, I have a debit card that's connected to her account. I did it just this morning, actually. I needed to replace something and it was something very inexpensive, but I thought, you know, mom can pay for this. It does make life a lot easier.
Right. Well, I mean, I've been on my mother's bank account. Really, I think she did that not long after my father died, and that's been 25 years. And she got some really good advice. She did the POA. Yeah. And she put me on her bank account, and I've been on there since then. So, you know, I do her grocery shopping, same as you and your brother do, and I just use her card. Yeah. But it's actually got my name on it. Right. So it's not a big deal. Yeah. You may also consider contacting credit bureaus to lock down their credit so they can't sign up for a new credit card without your knowledge. And, that's, you know, there's a lot of paranoia with dementia, and they may think, my son or my daughter is trying to steal my money. Well, I'm going to get a new credit card so I can buy what I want to buy. That way, you know, make sure that doesn't happen. Again, it stinks that you have to do it, but it's a fact of life. Another piece of advice from Vance is to check their phone regularly, their email and stuff like that, to ensure they haven't signed up for anything new without your knowledge. This is for someone who has a smartphone or maybe a laptop with email. If that becomes a problem, though, a switch to a flip phone and a removal of the laptop might be necessary.
Right. Again, these are more extreme circumstances, but, you know, certainly things to file away that you at least want to start thinking about. Again, we're talking about when you first get this diagnosis, what are the things you want to start thinking about that are, you know, potentially headed down the road for you. And of course, the smartphones and technology, we've certainly touched on those, you know, those things in other episodes. You know, much like the POA is a good idea no matter what. Checking your loved one's phone, if they have a smartphone, their email, their texts, that's a good idea on a regular basis. Their Facebook. I probably once a week, maybe once every couple of weeks. I'm not sure if my brother does this or not, but I do. Like, I go through her text messages. I am not trying to be nosy, and I mean, really, whatever. She doesn't care. But, you know, there are a lot of texts out there that come in that say, you know, click on this or reply to this or whatever. Like, I try to get those things off her phone quickly. I try to get her out of dumb Facebook groups that she signed up for that, you know, they might be all about, I don't know, Snoopy memes, but, you know, probably her data is being collected somewhere for nefarious purposes. And, you know, it's a good idea to go through and clean that stuff up somewhat regularly, no matter what. Another piece of advice from Vance that's really good is to dementia-proof their house or their apartment. So this is obviously most important if they're currently living independently. We've talked a little bit about this on our show before, but, you know, specific items for individuals with dementia can include things like, you know, if they have a gas stove, maybe you should think about adding a leak detector with an automatic shutoff in case they leave the gas on. In the bathroom, you know, you can, you know, some type of limiter to ensure that they don't scald themselves on really, you know, hot water. Obviously, you want to add grab bars in the bathroom and acquire a bed that's not easy to fall out of. You know, certainly those are things that some, you know, Gagi has those things already at this point. Certainly your mom does in the assisted living, but, you know, those are good things to have. But, you know, I think when people get dementia, these things become even more important. They're, you know, maybe forgetting, you know, they simply forget how to do something, how to, you know, even for lack of a better term, like sort of operate their body. So you just need to be really careful with them. And, you know, Vance does point out that some of these things can be expensive, but they 100% are cheaper than a hospital stay and rehab afterwards.
That's absolutely true.
You know, definitely don't forget to do your research too about what things might be able to be paid for through whatever your loved one has.
Medicare, Medicaid, insurance.
Medicare, Medicaid. Are there, local organizations that maybe can help with stuff? Not dementia related, but for example, I mean, my mom has gotten free eyeglasses for years through the local Lions Club.
Yeah,
like
Lions Club is great for that.
They have a program set up for that.
Going back to the gas stove, another thing, and I remember this from, so my grandmother, my mother's mother, had Alzheimer's. I'm sure we've mentioned this before, but she moved into an assisted living facility. And this particular facility, though, in the rooms, they had a stove, a refrigerator, and stuff like that. I mean, kind of a full small kitchenette. And I remember going over there, and the cord for the stove was up over top of it. And I asked my mother later, and I said, "What was that all about?" She said, "Oh, we're removing the stove." She kept leaving it on, and she doesn't need it anyway because they feed her.
Right.
But, if they still live independently, if they're still able to live independently, that stove might not be the safest thing to still keep plugged in, though.
Yeah.
And you can, if they have a microwave, those things will turn themselves off. Maybe an air fryer, something like that, where they can still cook a little bit. But the stove may just need to go away.
Yeah. I mean, these are all really tough things to think about. It's all really sad, but, safety first, for
Exactly.
sure. And, again, not dementia related specifically, but, years ago, we do keep a candle in my mom's apartment. It's a relatively small apartment, and we do light it every now and then, in part just to get a nice aroma in the apartment. Sometimes to wipe out other not so nice aromas in the apartment.
And we'll leave it at that.
We will leave it at that. But, my mom used to burn candles, on her own. But, we had a discussion years ago. And in fact, actually, this is one of those where I think she decided on her own, like, I really probably shouldn't burn candles anymore, because I think even she realized that there was the potential for her to leave a candle burning and forget about it.
Right.
So, I am very careful. I keep the candle in a very central place in her apartment. And I light it almost every time I go over there, but I'm very careful to also make sure that I blow it out before I leave.
I mean, I'm bad about, remembering to blow out a candle if I light it for some strange reason or another.
Yeah.
I don't tend to do that.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I do, I forget.
But, the larger point is even beyond things like, a gas stove that they might leave on. I mean, even think like the littlest of things, like if your loved one has always liked to burn candles, maybe get the candles and the matches out of their living space.
Right.
This is a really good tip, I think, from Vance. He mentions that you might want to utilize a GPS tracker.
Right. So we're talking like AirTags or something like that. You don't really want to put it on a jacket because they might wear a different jacket. You might want to put it on their shirt. He said a good idea, slip it into their shoe.
Yeah.
Maybe on
I guess they wear the same shoes.
If they tend to wear the same shoes.
Which my mom does.
Eventually, older folks, they tend to wear the same comfortable shoes.
They have like my mom has a really quality pair of shoes that have been made for her, by the way, formed for her foot because she's diabetic, and they're the only ones she wears now.
Right.
So
I think my mother has two pairs of sneakers that she wears, a pair of black ones and a pair of white ones. And so you might have to get two, but you slip it in there, maybe under the insole. They probably won't notice it. Test it, of course, to make sure it's still going to work in there. But that's the thing, is that way you can track them. You can use an app like Life 360 or something like that, a phone-based app. But what if they wander out of the house and they don't have their phone with them? So then you're up the creek. So that way, the AirTag, if you have it like in a shoe or something like that they always have with them, that way at least you'll know where they are.
Yeah.
Another idea is a medical alert bracelet with your phone number, your cell phone number on it. The whole point of this is that search times, if they wander away, search times will go way down if you have a general idea of where to look. But, if you don't have a general idea, if they're gone for an hour, they could be anywhere.
Yeah.
And I hear these stories.
So what do you mean? So then someone else comes across them and at least the phone number is there and they call you. Yeah.
That's the idea. Right. So, use the technology that's out there like an AirTag or something along those lines. Different companies make different ones. But you can just track them on your phone.
The technology is out there. It's just thinking about how to best utilize it.
Right.
Okay. So I'm very excited about this next one, not because of the tip, but I just got to this section in the copious notes.
Which you hadn't read in advance.
Steve always prepares for us. I had scanned through. But what you say here is the penultimate tip from Vance Frost.
Right.
Penultimate is one of our favorite words. We're going to have a squirrel moment here. This word became a favorite word from my favorite college professor. Hi, George. Squirrel moment here. Favorite college professor who was like a dad to me. I don't know if we've ever talked about him on the show, but George. George. His name is George. And we have George the squirrel, who I'm holding up right now. But anyway, I worked for George in college, and he really was like a father figure to me. Just a wonderful, wonderful man. Came to our wedding. Mm-hmm. Just absolutely lovely. And
took us both out to dinner a couple of times.
Yeah, and he took me out to dinner, even more than that, dinner and lunch. But rest in peace, George. But penultimate was a word that he used to love to use. He used to just get the funniest look on his face because he just thought he was being, he wanted to be clever. He was a brilliant man. Brilliant man. I don't think I'd ever heard the word penultimate really until George taught it to me. And of course, now it's just one of my favorite words.
So I put that in there just for you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, we didn't say what it is. In case you don't know, penultimate, second to last.
Next to last.
Next to last.
Next to last.
Fine. Okay. Next to last. Fine.
Right.
Anyway, the penultimate tip from Vance Frost is to understand the limitations of the system. We touched briefly on Medicare and Medicaid a few minutes ago, but, yes, Medicare or Medicaid will take care of a doctor visit or a hospital stay, but, not necessarily those services don't necessarily take care of feeding, bathing, and 24-hour supervision. I mean, yes, there are some services through Medicare and Medicaid that you might be able to access, but not the 24-hour supervision. So unless you have money for a full-time aide, someone to move into the home with your loved one, or assisted living or memory care, that's really going to be on you. And, unfortunately, you're just going to have to get used to it. Unfortunately,
this is your life now, basically, and that's something that you have to get into your headspace this is how things are now.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about, my mom has a neighbor just across the parking lot in one of the other apartment buildings, and her son lives with her. And so, of course, my brother and I have gotten to know him a little bit. He's a very, very nice man. He's definitely a little older than I am. He might be my brother's age, but his mom has
some variety of dementia.
Some variety. And in fact, I just bumped into him out in the parking lot the other day, and through the course of conversation, he was telling me that his, mom was up in the middle of the night for 45 minutes looking for her boyfriend.
Yep.
I mean, she's older. She hasn't had a boyfriend or a husband for, I think, probably a really long time. Mm-hmm. And then he was saying something too about she was intent on finding a flashlight, and it was a big thing that she had to find this flashlight. And man, he's there 24/7. And by the way, he has siblings. They don't come around. He has definitely mentioned to me, to my brother, to my mom before how fortunate we all are, the three of us all are, or how fortunate, my brother and I are that we have each other to share all of this stuff. Because, man, he is in it all by himself. But it's a 24/7 thing when someone hits that level of dementia or Alzheimer's, because it's not safe for them to be by themselves.
So our final tip from Vance Frost is something, kind of along the lines of what Jennifer was just talking about, but, something that a lot of people don't think about really. And it's somewhat true for all types of caregiving, but particularly dementia. You need to get used to the idea that you are not the child anymore.
Yeah.
That child that looked up to their parent for approval, that person's now dead.
Yeah.
With dementia, the person who raised you is gone or will be soon. Don't wait for gratitude. You're not likely to get it.
Yeah.
Don't punish yourself for getting irritated, because it's going to happen a lot.
Yeah.
Your job is now an administrator. You are the administrator. Your job is to keep your loved ones safe, keep yourself sane, and don't let the money run out. Those are your three primary jobs.
Yeah.
And like I said before, don't look for gratitude, because you're just not going to get it. They don't think that way anymore.
Yeah. And it's sad.
That person's gone.
It's sad, and I have no doubt that, there's a process that a mental and emotional process that you go through when you realize that's where you are. Give yourself, we talk about this a lot, give yourself a little bit of grace. To your point, you're going to get irritated sometimes. And if you've ever been around someone who has, full on Alzheimer's and they're asking the same questions over and over again, I'll never forget the first time I was around somebody like that. This was years ago. And probably every 10 minutes, they were telling me about the cushions that they had recovered on their patio furniture. And I was young. I was probably like 16 at that point. And it was very jarring. And I was only around that person for an hour. If you're around it all the time and it's your mom or your dad and you have the realization that is what your life is now, I'm sure that's a tough thing. But probably the sooner you can get used to it and just step in and take charge of the things you need to take charge of, the better.
Right. I always, whenever I think about Alzheimer's, I think back, and you've heard this story a million times, but I don't think I've told it on the show before. I was my grandmother's second emergency contact. So if they couldn't get a hold of my mother, they reached out to me. And my mother was usually available, and I didn't have to do too much with my grandmother. But there was one particular day, she had an accident she was in a nursing home at this point. She had an accident. She tried to get out of bed. Her hand slipped off the mattress and sliced all the way down her arm, piece of metal there. Man,
I remember that.
And they couldn't reach my mother, so they reached out, and I rushed on down to the hospital. And they pointed me to her, and I walked over, and like I said, I hadn't seen her for a while. And I walked over and I said, "Hi, Granny." That's what I called her, Granny. And she just looked at me very blankly. And I said, "Do you know who I am?" And she shook her head. Yeah. By the way, this whole time she didn't say one single word, but she just shook her head. And I said, I'm your grandson, Stephen." And she looked at me. She kind of cocked her head, and she looked at how tall I am.
Yeah.
And then
I was just thinking, you're not a small.
And then looked down and just kind of put her hand at the height that I would have been at the age of 8. And then looked at me and then looked at her hand and shook her head.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm your grandson.
I'm your 6'3" grandson who you still think is 5 foot tall.
Exactly. And I mean, eventually I think she accepted the fact that I was her grandson. And, I ended up spending the whole time just trying to keep her occupied. I showed her pictures of our kids who were young at the time. I showed pictures of my brother's kids, so that's her great grandkids. And, it was nice. Again, she didn't say one single word the whole time. And by the way, her arm was sliced really badly. The kind of old lady flap under under the arm, it sliced that thing wide open. Yeah. You could actually see into it, and it didn't seem to bother her. So I think there was, something there with the brain and the pain
maybe
receptors.
Not even connecting. Which
she lifted her arm up and just showed me and said, they had to stitch her up.
She was a tough lady too, though, in general. But anyway, in a lot of ways. But also, think about how it's sad when you think about it. That potentially was really scary for her because, again, you're 6'3", you're a tall dude.
Yeah.
Walking in. She doesn't necessarily know who you are, like that. Put yourself
she didn't seem bothered, really,
which is good, but I think that potentially could be really scary.
I think she had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
I mean, she knew why she was there because she lifted her arm up.
Yeah.
This is why I'm here. I did this. She probably didn't remember how.
We want to end this episode with a quote from Vance Frost from a different Substack. I just wanted to say Vance Frost.
Vance Frost.
Again. Yeah, Vance Frost. What does that remind me of?
Robert Frost?
No. It reminds me of an episode of The Office. Bob Vance from Vance Refrigeration. Vance Frost. I feel like I want to say Vance Frost. But it's a quote from Vance from a different Substack article that he wrote. He said that with dementia, there are always 2 patients. One is in the hospital bed and one is in the hallway. Most of the time, the one in the hallway breaks first.
It's true.
So what does that mean?
Well, it gets to the point eventually where the person in the bed, they're not really there anymore. Yeah. You're still there.
Yep.
You've had to watch them go away
this whole time. Really tough.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
We want to thank Vance for letting us paraphrase his Substack article.
Yeah. And say his name.
And say his name over and over again. You can find his Substack at vancefrost.com. dementia.substack.com, and we'll put a link to that in our show notes as well, so you can subscribe and read more. He's been churning out a lot of good articles, and I think this is something that he wants to do now. This was one of his first ones.
Okay.
And
well, we'll have to keep an eye on it, because I feel like there's going to be other good topics maybe that we can pull from it and talk about here.
Well, I subscribe to it,
okay.
so I check them when they come in. It's a lot. There's a lot of stuff about dementia in there. So if you're dealing with someone with dementia, or you anticipate that's coming, definitely subscribe and read his stuff. And
to be clear, he didn't want to be interviewed.
He did
right?
not
that
want
wasn't
to be
his
interviewed. He said
level,
he would prefer to just keep it in print.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
So, but he was more than happy to let us do a paraphrase, though.
All right. Well, Vance, we appreciate it.
So thanks to everyone for listening to this episode. As we always say, please, we want to hear your questions. We want to hear your comments. We want to hear your how's your mom's, how's your dad's, how's your uncle's, how's your whoever you're taking care of. You can reach out to us at caregivinggenxstyle@gmail.com. You can send us a text or leave a voicemail. Voicemails are best. 804-723-1221 is the number. And I believe I've said before, if you call that number, I will not pick up. That goes straight to voicemail.
Aw, shucks.
I know.
Maybe somebody really wants to talk to you.
You can also find us on Twitter, the handle at Gen X Caregiving. We're on Facebook. Go to the show notes for this episode. Click on the link and it will take you straight there. We hope to hear from you soon. Have a great day.
Good night, everyone.